Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Howdy, I'm Rebekah Valentine. I'm a reporter with IGN, and I'm here to tell you about a weird little game for the Nintendo DS called Contact. Now, unless you're unusual and really love bizarre, ambitious, eclectic, Earthbound-like games like I do, you might not have heard of Contact. It was very much a bargain bin game in its time, despite how incredible and surprising it actually is. It is made by a developer you probably have heard of, a little studio called Grasshopper. It came out in 2006 for the Nintendo DS. And yes, as I said, it is very inspired by Earthbound, which is one of the reasons why I love it. Play as this young boy named Terry, whose life is just completely upended when, in the opening sequence of the game, this very goofy, scientist professor guy in a spaceship just accidentally abducts him from Earth in the process of fleeing from some space aliens. He basically kind of flies over Earth, grabs Terry, and then leaves, and then crash lands both of them on a completely different planet, just a weird, strange planet that they've never been to before. It's the two of them, the professor and Terry, and then also the professor has this adorable dog that thinks it's a cat, cat that thinks he's a dog. It's an open-ended thing, but he has a pet named Mochi. And so it's the three of them on this strange planet. So in order to get back home, Terry has to go out into the world and collect power cells. By exploring this planet, they're all over the place. There's a bunch of different areas. You start out on kind of a deserted beach. There's all kinds of different areas you can visit. And you have to find these power cells so you can get home. But there's various enemies. Some of them are just creatures that live on this planet. Some of them appear to be an alien army that is chasing you. And you kind of progress through the game this way. It is top-down combat. A lot of it is automatic. You can kind of just set Terry to fight enemies, but you can input commands using either the touchscreen or buttons as you go, and sort of direct him, even though a lot of the combat is automated. And it's a very cool system because you get equipment that you can pick up and change your fighting style. You can also give Terry boosts in battle by equipping stickers and decals that you find. But then you also get different costumes as you explore this planet. You can dress up like a chef, for instance, and do a bunch of cooking themed attacks. And there's all different costumes you can get that will shift Terry's stats around and make him better at different kinds of things. And some of the costumes are the end result of side quests that you can also discover as you're going. It's kind of a very straightforward game in that respect. But the thing that really makes me love Contact is the way it messes around with the player and the way it kind of breaks the fourth wall and the way it uses the Nintendo DS to accomplish all that. So the DS is a dual screen device, right? It's got the touch screen on the bottom, which, by the way, you can control the game with either the touch screen or the buttons, which I thought was a nice touch. But it's got the touch screen on the bottom, and then it has a screen up top as well. And as you're playing, Terry and his adventure is fully on the bottom screen. So everything that you're doing out in the world as Terry is down there. But you have the professor in his spaceship lab sitting up on the top screen with Mochi. And the professor will talk to you as you play, and he will give you hints that will help you on your journey. And there's a very clear visual separation between the two, where the professor and Mochi are in more of a animated cartoony style, and then Terry is in this... It's not exactly a clay kind of look, but it's a little more of a 3D modeled kind of look almost. But there's a very clear aesthetic separation that indicates the two people are from very different worlds. And when Terry visits the professor in his spaceship, you see him run up onto the top screen, and you can see that contrast really clearly. As the plot progresses, you start to get wind that maybe not everything here is above board. You will notice that the professor is not really talking to Terry when he's giving hints. He's talking to the player, and specifically referring to the player as a separate entity from Terry. And you might start to get the idea that the professor is not exactly the most trustworthy person in the world. And as the plot progresses, you start to see a lot of that really interesting fourth wall breaking. I don't want to spoil this game for anybody, but it has one of the most fascinating and disappointing, but in a good way, endings of a video game that I've ever played. It's not that the ending is disappointing, it's that it makes you feel disappointment if that makes sense, like in a very specific, deliberate way. I can't say more, and I don't want to spoil it, even though this is a game from 2006, and you're probably not going to play it because, as I said, this is not received well. I think people didn't like how automatic the combat was. I do think it can feel a little grindy at times. There's the majority of the dialogue in the story is told between the professor and Terry and Mochi. There's not a whole lot else going on in the world. There are characters and NPCs and shops that you can run into, but they're kind of spread out. And so I think that puts some people off. It can be a little vague, kind of in the way that older games tend to be, where it isn't explicit about where you should be going or what you should be doing at a given time. And it can be difficult, too, even though the combat is automatic. If you're not sort of min-maxing your stickers or using certain costumes well, then you might struggle in some of the fights, especially some of the boss fights that are a little bit tricky. But I think it's really good, and I think it's super duper underrated. It sold terribly, which is really sad. But the main designer, Akira Ueda, said that he did want to work with Suda Grasshopper on a sequel. I mean, he said that like way back in 2000 whatever, so I don't know if we're going to get one. But I really do hope we get one day, because I think that there is a very fascinating tradition of games inspired by Earthbound, in that they take in and embrace how weird Earthbound was and how very attached it was to like modern day kid culture, right? Because I think a lot of the Earthbound inspired games that tend to hit mainstream are a little more safe than Earthbound ever was. And that's why I really love games like Contact and, well, Undertale, which did end up being very popular, and Moon, which is also, it's now available on the Switch, but that's another old game that is very like Earthbound, even if if I remember right, it came before Earthbound. So yeah, there's a lot of weird games like that I think Earthbound fans can really embrace, and Contact is one of the underrated hidden gems of the Nintendo DS era. I really hope we get a sequel someday, but in the meantime, I'd encourage anyone with access to a DS and a gaming bargain bin to give Contact another try, especially if you're a lover of either Earthbound or just the weird, goofy stuff that Grasshopper does. I hope you get a chance to try it out. Happy gaming!
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun, whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, aka Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.